As promised, we're jumping right in, and the first thing on our to-do list is to understand how you're gonna be creating evergreen content. At the end of the day, evergreen content is gonna be the key element everything else will circle back to, and creating evergreen content is always a good idea, so let's get started. So evergreen content is all about creating a long-lasting and always relevant content that is available for your audience at any time. That's why we need to have that website. We need to have that space that is your online space that does not depend on social media, where you can post your evergreen content. Your evergreen content doesn't rely on trends, it doesn't rely on you showing up, it doesn't rely on whether or not Instagram and Facebook are working today. You're not expected to go viral for it to work. Evergreen content works if you are creating it. That is just the baseline of it all. If you are producing good evergreen content, it will bring you results. And that is the biggest difference between social media and evergreen content. First of all, social media is so short-lived. For example, on Instagram, when you post a story, it lasts 24 hours, right? Even when you post an actual Instagram post, it will last on other feeds maybe a day, and you will barely reach anyone. Especially these days, as I'm recording this, there's a lot happening on Instagram and reach for many is very low. And you really get sucked into the whole deal of like overthinking the views, overthinking the likes, the comments, what you should and what you shouldn't do. When you are creating evergreen content that lives on your website, it's your rules, and that is the best part of it all. Now hear me out. You can start with any type of content that comes easy for you. And even though I'm not gonna be going too much into this, you can just as well start by creating Instagram posts that later are expanded into evergreen content, okay? But at the end of this, no matter what is your starting point, the goal will always be a fully written post published on your own website. So first of all, and what this course originally was all about really, before I decided to extend it a bit into other options as well, it's all about writing blog posts. So even if you start anywhere else, even if you start with Instagram post, or as it's showcased here, you start with a podcast or a video, whatever is the case, at the end of it, you will still have that written post, right? But if you love writing and you find it easier for yourself, you can also start with blog posts. And that is the route that I'm always going for. I love writing. I've been writing longer than I actually have my own business. And I started my business with blogging. So blogging is something that comes easy for me. But if you find yourself in the opposite situation and it's really hard for you to write, especially when it comes to good blog posts, you might as well start elsewhere. So when it comes to writing, your blog post should have your voice. You must share your personal insights, your experience. Blogging is not a matter of researching a topic and just rewriting what you just read, right? You want to focus on your perspectives, on what you have experienced, what you can share, and what is your specific expertise. An important thing to note is that writing blog posts is not about creating AI-generated content, okay? This is very important. When I'm talking about writing blogs, I mean you sitting down to write your own thoughts, okay? To put it very simply. I do not mean going to AI tools and like generating blog posts just for the sake of it. Everyone can do it and it doesn't work, okay? It might work for the short term, it might work if you get lucky, but it's not a long-term strategy to follow. That's why I have mentioned that your post should have your voice. They should be based on your experiences. And yes, you can use AI tools to generate ideas. You can use AI tools to create a structure for your post. But ultimately, the post should be written by you. If that writing part is not sitting well with you, you can also start with a different type of content. So your starting point, for example, can be a podcast. Podcasting is an amazing way to reach new audience. And it doesn't stop there. It's not only the audio podcast that you're creating, you're also creating the transcription of the audio that you're recording. So at the end of it, you still have that written post. Just the starting point potentially was easier if you prefer talking versus writing. Maybe you already have videos on YouTube, or you have videos that you have created for any other purpose, and you could literally just take the content from the videos and then put that into blog posts. Now, to get to that final blog post, there are many different ways to go, and I'm focusing on teaching you how you can do it yourself. But obviously, if you choose to outsource it or find someone who will do the transcription for you and make sure that everything is optimized, you can definitely do that as well. So whichever way you choose, it's a good way to go because the end goal is the same. You will have a written post out of it. Now here's just a quick sample of how all of this is going to work. So for example, if you are writing your own blog post, you're starting with that base content on your website, which is the key goal of it all, right? Your evergreen content lives on your website under your own domain name. Now, when you have written your blog post, you can do so many things with it. You can repurpose it into social media posts. You can repurpose it into email marketing. There are so many things that you can do with one blog post, okay? So you shouldn't look at it as only, oh, I wrote a post. No, you can actually repurpose it in so many different ways, and it's such a great base material. As for the podcasting, so for example, I recently started doing podcasts as well. I absolutely love it, and talking comes so easy for me. I could literally be just chatting all day long. And as I have recorded the podcast, I can transcribe it and have everything I have talked about in a written way. Now, you should still optimize your posts, and we're going to be talking about that as well. You can't really just take the full transcript and put it on a blog and let it be. You want your evergreen content to be optimized for it to actually work. But ultimately, after you have recorded the podcast episode, you still put it on your blog and the cycle continues. Again, you can repurpose it in so many different ways. And this course is not about repurposing per se, but I just want to give this option to you so you know that it's not only about creating that one piece of content. Now, let's talk about evergreen content guidelines. So you're ready to create your content, and I also have to note that even though you can create your content in whatever way you want to, my main reference point will always be blog posts. So if I'm talking about blog posts, but you're thinking about podcasting, we're still talking about the same thing at the end of the day because your podcast will be turned into blog post anyways. So at the end of the day, all of that is a blog post. I'm just mentioning this for future reference. If you're thinking, why am I talking only about blogging? I'm not going to always continue mentioning all of these different elements. So how to create good content? First of all, you want it to be audience focused. We talk a lot about search engine optimization. So even though this is not an SEO course, I'm talking a lot about it because any evergreen content has a huge potential to be found on Google, right? And other search engines as well. And you want to right away be sure that as you're creating content, you are optimizing it for search engines as well, which is what SEO means. Yes, we want to be recognized by Google. We want to write content that Google will love and so on. But first of all, we are writing for people. We're writing for that person, that ideal audience on the other side. So what it is that your audience is searching for? What type of posts do they want to read? What are the questions that they are asking? Next up, keyword rich. Now we circle back to SEO again. You want to make sure that you also consider what keywords your audience is searching this content by. So what is that? Usually it's a phrase, so we're not focusing only on one word per se, we're focusing on a phrase that they will type in Google to find what you are talking about. And in this course, we're going to be talking a lot more about Pinterest, so I will circle back to that later as well. But the same goes for Pinterest. Pinterest is also keyword driven, so you also have to think about it in terms of what they're going to be searching on Pinterest to find what you're writing about. You want to always be thinking about your audience, and even when it comes to keywords, we're still thinking about how your audience is going to be searching for you. And last but not least, it has to be relevant and valuable. You want to make sure that you're not writing the content just for the sake of creating content. whatever is the question that you're discussing within your post, you want to make sure that you bring some purpose in there, that there's a value, that when somebody reads through it, they can actually take away something from it. And you want to make sure that whatever your audience searched for, so those keywords, that you actually answer that question or answer that prompt, whatever it is that you suggested will be found in your blog, okay? So you always think about the value you can bring and think about what it is that your audience is searching for. Don't create generic content. And you might feel like, oh, there are so many posts already, right? Why should I write the same thing? Because it's your perspective, it's your unique twist, it's your experience, it's what you specifically are thinking about specific situations, it's your preferences, right? That's what makes your content unique, even though there might be like thousands of other answers online to the same question. You want to show up with your perspective through your content. Okay, now let's walk through some of the first steps you can take to actually start creating that content. First thing on our list is to decide what you're going to be writing about and creating some post ideas. So first of all, what are the key topics that your ideal audience will want to explore? For example, I'm talking about course creation, so I'm focusing on topics like generating a good curriculum, designing your course, choosing the best platforms, and marketing your offers. These are the 4 categories. I do have several more, but just for the sake of sample, I'm focusing on these. Now, you want to choose something that, first of all, you know your audience will be interested in, so something that is relevant to your specific niche, but you also want to be thinking about what it is that you love, what it is that you want to be talking about, right? You don't want to be choosing some random topics or like the most popular topics just because you feel like that is something you have to do. For example, within my niche, I could also be talking about generating sales through Facebook ads or in general paid marketing, but that is something I rarely ever even mention because it's not really something I believe in. So that's not the topic I have chosen for myself. And also be mindful about the fact that these topics might come and go along the way. It can change. It doesn't mean that what you choose now is going to be with you forever. You might decide to niche down, you might decide to expand and actually choose some different direction. Just start with whatever makes the most sense for you now. Once that is done, you want to start exploring some keywords. So what are the actual phrases that your audience will be searching to find answers to these related topics? You can use keyword tools like Ubersuggest for some ideas, and you can also just start by checking out what people in your niche are sharing, what it is that they're talking about, what are the common themes that keep coming up, and common keywords. So when it comes to keywords, we're not looking at just one word. So for example, courses. What does that word mean? There could be so many things if I go to Google and search for courses. Will different platforms come up? Will different courses come up? Can I learn or can I create? Or like what is gonna be there? Are there gonna be business courses or like design courses or maybe Cambridge courses, right? I really don't know. However, if that one keyword is changed to, for example, online courses for business owners, we already have some more clarity. I know that I'm gonna find learning materials that can be used by business owners, right? And nobody goes on Google just to search for courses because we all already have some idea what it is that we need, right? And you want to be researching these keywords for your topics as well, and you want to make sure that there are different long tail keywords. Each post will have just one keyword, so it's not the kind of a deal that you can just do once and forget it. But for now, we're looking at these topics that you want to be talking about and just exploring some different keyword directions for each. Now what you want to do, you want to go into each of these categories and look at the keywords under each of the categories and start preparing some post ideas. And again, you can use the research, you can check what your competitors are talking about, not to steal their ideas, but just to gain some inspiration. And usually when I start writing some ideas or when I start like writing one post, I suddenly have like ideas for 10 more. So I just keep writing these ideas down just for the next time. And a great way to actually store all of that information is Trello. It's free to use and you can easily manage all of your content bank in there. So I would suggest you to check that out if you haven't already, but you can definitely use plenty of other management systems as well. And now as you have your ideas, you want to actually start writing. Now, don't do that before we go to the third step, but in general, this is what you're gonna do now. So you want to first of all think, how many posts can you write right now, keeping them highly valuable and very relevant to your audience. I would suggest starting with at least one weekly post, ideally maybe two. If you can just sit down and create like 3-4 posts per week, amazing. But remember that all of these posts have to be relevant. They have to be valuable. You're not creating just for the quantity, you're creating for the quality. From there on, once you have that base of content created, you want to choose a schedule that will be easy for you to upkeep. It's also important for SEO that you do create consistent new content. So I'm currently doing monthly or bi-monthly content. So I'm creating like 2 posts per month if I can, maybe at least 1 post per month. You can do 1 post per month if that's what rocks your boat. Most successful bloggers will do at least 1 post weekly, but it really depends. You just want to stay consistent. You want to make sure that you keep showing up with new information. And as for the writing itself, you want to make sure that you have a good text hierarchy, that your text makes sense. When I look at it, I want to be seeing headlines. I want to see what is the most important part of the text, what is less important. You want to use bullet points, you want to use bold formatting, and obviously not everywhere, but if I'm skimming through your posts, I want to easily see those key points. This will also be important for SEO. And for some inspiration, you can always just check out what other creators are doing, and especially if they are known in your field, you will see that they have very well structured blog posts. And as for the topics, always focus on evergreen information as we are creating evergreen content. But you can always circle back to your posts and actually go into them and edit later down the road as well, which is something that you should be doing, but we're talking about like circling back to your posts year or 2 later. So it's not really something that should be on your to-do list per se, but just to make sure everything is relevant and up to date, you will want to do that later down the road. Now, the last but not least on our list, and as I mentioned, this is not an SEO course, but SEO details like the elements of SEO will be always present because you want to be creating good content, and SEO is kind of the guideline for a good content. So SEO means search engine optimization, I have already mentioned here and there, and you want to make sure that all of your blog posts, every content you put out there is optimized. So there's a checklist, that like a guideline that I have added in the downloadable, where you can just take that and make sure that every time you write a post, you follow through with everything that is mentioned there. But here's just a very quick list, and this is really very condensed. There is more beyond that. So first of all, you want to make sure that each post has a specific keyword. You do not want to reuse the same keyword for different posts. Another important thing is to add inner links to other relevant posts in your own website, okay? So as you are actually creating the content, you want to make sure that you're thinking about like other references you can make. So whenever somebody is reading through it, they can easily click to other posts and continue reading more. The next thing is to always include at least one image, and for you that can also be a pin. My one image always is a pin, and we're going to be talking about Pinterest and pins separately, so I won't go too deep into that. However, if there are any other relevant images you might want to add, do that as well. And I don't mean just filling it with stock photos, but if it's relevant and if it makes sense for the content, do that. And the last but not least, you also want to think about optimizing the images. So you will want to think about writing the alt text. And this can be easily done as you actually click on image. For most platforms, that you just click on it, you will have like a simple field where you can write it in. And in the guidelines, I have shared some samples of that as well. And again, I have to remind you that these are just kind of basics, and in that added download, you will find more details. So as for getting started, you really want to focus on creating as much valuable content as you can. It doesn't mean that now you have to produce 5 posts per day or even 5 posts per week, Be realistic about what it is that you can do, but the more valuable content you can create initially, the easier it will be for search engines as well as Pinterest to actually start recognizing your website and understand what it is that you are all about. As for the number of words, start with at least minimum of 800. There are many different variations you can go for, and currently there's also a lot of discussion what will Google recognize more these days, because things are changing a lot and really fast. But I'm still always focusing on my user experience, and I want to make sure that my audience is getting from the post what they came for. And in many cases, that will mean that my blog posts will be longer rather than shorter. On average, my posts are at least above 1,000 words, but it can be longer as well. Now let's do a quick recap of your to-dos. So first of all, you want to come up with several content categories you would like to cover. You want to research relevant keywords, or at least start coming up with some ideas, and write down post ideas. Then you will want to start actually writing the posts, keeping in mind the SEO guidelines. But always remember that we're talking about writing quality over quantity, right? It's not about how many posts you have. You want to make sure they're relevant and valuable. That's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one.